Hey guys, welcome to Electronic Dance Money, your number one business resource for making money as electronic musicians and producers. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Electronic Dance Money. I'm your host, Christian Casito, and we got a great episode in store today. I've got Torbjørn here. How you doing, man?
Yo, long-time listener, first-time caller. Excited to be here.
Long time, first time.
Yeah.
You reached out to me. Well, I guess Luke Rain from the Human Music Podcast, and he's self-titled for his artist project. Luke Rain reached out like a few weeks ago and connected us, which was really, really awesome. Thank you, Luke. I want to just say, because he gets the vibe of the show. He understands what I'm going for, and so that was his first referral, and he, like a bullseye, nailed it. And I especially loved your response because you're like, here's 7 things we can talk about. And I was like, oh my God, you already got my brain going. This is perfect. I have many people reach out who are like, hey, yo, so I got like all these accolades and I've done this and I've done that. You should have me on your podcast. And I'm like, what are we going to talk about? What's there to talk about there? And so I really appreciate that. Luke was like, oh, I got a good guest. And then you just had so many great ideas.
Yeah, man. Well, I came across your podcast organically. Like, I'm always looking for good music podcasts, and especially stuff on the industry side, behind closed doors. What do managers do? What do agents do? Like, I'm always intrigued by that stuff as much as I am intrigued about the creative side of things. So when I found your podcast, I listened to 20 or 30 episodes until you had featured the Human Music Podcast guys. And I was like, oh, I know those guys. That's always like, as someone who wants to be on podcasts that I love listening to, there's always a bit of a disconnect because not everyone like puts their contact info out there, right? So I knew when we had the mutual friends of Luke and Tesco and Rip Kenny, I was like, I feel like I've got a shot. Really want to be on this podcast. And here I am. Couldn't be more excited, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And your knowledge of the things you do really impress me because it's very rare that you find a producer that makes great music. Your tracks on Spotify are fucking bangers.
Thanks, man.
But then also you've got this creative itch in these other fields that are still within, like, they all kind of mesh together within music, especially when we're talking about live shows, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about, adding value to live shows in today's episode, which has been a topic that I've been thinking of doing for years. I've had it on my list for like 2 or 3 years, but it's so hard to find someone that really inherently knows how to add value to a live show. My buddy Paxton, who's been on the podcast before, he's a fantastic photographer and videographer. He is friends with Goldfish, and I think they're from Australia, and they do a lot, like most of their stuff live on stage. So they've got keyboards set up. I think they play drums, and I want to say like sax and stuff. They do all sorts of stuff, but it's all electronic music. So Paxton's actually the person that gave me the idea of he showed me who they were. He shot for them at Imagine Fest.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was at Imagine Fest. And once I saw their live set, I was like, shit, this would be a great topic idea. And so I hit him up. I was like, hey, could you help me get them on the show? And that never ended up happening. So I just had this idea on the list where I'm like, I mean, if I run into Excision, that would be sick because he knows how to add great value to live show. Like there's few people who really know how to do it that are a great another great reference would be like Infected. Have you seen Infected Mushroom live?
No, but I know him from like his plugins and stuff, and he does a lot outside of producing, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, they do. They have a full band.
Nice.
And it's all like psytrance with a band. It's fucking wild. I mean, drums, guitars. The first time I saw them live was at Paradiso in 2015, I think, and that's when I was like, "Oh," and they were doing a full live show on main stage at the Gorge. It was fucking bananas. And then they came through Boise, and I went and saw them, and it was just so good again. So it's like people who incorporate things that are electronic, because everyone plays CDJs most of the time, and that's not to say that you can't make a really cool live experience DJing. I think you can. We're gonna dive into some of those ideas today, but if you can incorporate other things that you don't expect at a show, I mean, say what you will about the man, but like Steve Aoki, like he throws fucking cakes at the crowd. Like that is
with accuracy,
with great accuracy. So like that's a thing you wouldn't expect at a show, but it increases the value. Like you want to go to the next one. Dada Life is another one that, I mean, a pillow fight. Who imagined fucking pillow fights at a show and how fun that would be? Or bananas. Like it's weird things that make the artist more unique, and it makes fans want to come to the show so much more. So we're going to be jumping into all that stuff. Before we do that though, I would love to hear more about your story, your background. So take us back to when you first found electronic music up until how you got to the point where you're at now.
Yeah, man. I feel real fortunate that my parents put me into music education at a super young age. I had older cousins that were in orchestra, so I was kind of like born into being an orchestra kid. Started playing violin when I was like 4. Wasn't really that into it, but my parents were really dedicated to pushing me through those programs because of all the different things that it helps in child development. Makes you smarter, the team building aspect of being in an ensemble, all these kind of things. And I didn't find my passion for music probably until like middle school, maybe early high school. I think a lot of people resonate with that. You become aware that like girls or guys or whatever you're into, like kind of think it's cool to see someone in a band. So that was a big motivation for me. I always wanted to be a songwriter. I always wanted to express myself, but that didn't happen until I picked up the guitar and started singing. And then the next step there was like, okay, how do I take this further? I don't know how to afford studio time. So if I want to make an album, I'm going to have to learn how to make an album. I had some really great mentorship in my middle school years of some people that made me aware of the Tacoma School of the Arts, public high school that partners with a nonprofit to offer some extended arts classes. And they were the only school in my area that offered like an audio recording program at the high school level. So I was like, that's the goal. And got my parents on board. They helped me with an application. I worked my butt off to have a good audition and all this stuff, and got to go to that school because I wanted to learn how to record. And the same kind of dedication that had been and determination that had been instilled in me through being a kid in orchestra programs, I applied to that audio program. And I was fortunate to have the right resources and the right mentorship and the right attitude. And I got really good at that. My senior project, culminating project at that high school, was writing, recording, and mixing a full-length album with my band. We were like 17. And at the time, I was like, I don't know, the bands that I look up to did this, so this can't be like that big of a deal. But it wasn't until later years and going to pursue that at the college level that I realized that, like, man, I'm really like lucky. Not everybody gets to do this. A lot of people want to do this and have the motivation, maybe don't have the resources, or vice versa, have the resources but take it for granted. So I was that perfect storm of like, really wanted to do this, really had the right upbringing, had parents that were also creative or technologically inclined that helped me pursue that. And so I got to do that. I absolutely don't take it for granted now, because I have a lot of friends that are like, oh, I wish I had that opportunity, or if I had what you had, and vice versa. And so I definitely take that, that's those comments and knowledge of that hits close to home. I definitely don't take it for granted. I'm really grateful for it. But that was kind of my story. The schools that I got accepted to in college were a 1-year diploma school in Norway, which is where my grandparents are from. A little family connection there was how I was able to be aware and get connected with that. Had to learn a new language while I was in college. That was like a whole other thing. But the determination and the path and like goal oriented motivation was always a part of it. I got recruited from that school to go to another audio program in Liverpool at this Liverpool Performing Arts School, Institute of Performing Arts, LIPA, which was a school that was founded by Paul McCartney in the 80s. And so that was a whole wild thing where I just through naturally following my passion and like working my butt off and really like wanting these successes and really working towards them, found that I aligned with what the schools were looking for in their students. And I didn't think that I was going to get accepted to that school. When I interviewed for it, my motivation to show up was they were like, one of our professors will review your mix. My band was trying to finish an EP at the time, and I was like producing, writing, mixing, doing way too much work for one person. And I was like, I need some help from a professional. So I'm going to go do this interview, whatever, go through these motions, and then get some good feedback from someone who really knows what they're doing. And the feedback that I got from the guy, he was like, well, I don't really have anything. I feel like you know what the next steps are. It seems like you know what you're doing, so I don't really know what to say. At the time, I thought like, man, this guy's kind of being a jerk. Like he just doesn't want to help me out. And then in hindsight, of course, realizing that really what he was saying is he was like, you're kind of a cut above what we are expecting at this point. So I'm expecting, no, sorry, you're not accepted to the program. Maybe try again later. But I got a call from my mom a few weeks later. She's like, yeah, they accepted you. So do you want to move back to Washington and like go to community college, or do you want to go to this art school in England? And I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. So got to go to this awesome program and was pursuing recording arts there. And kind of my interest started to shift away from being in the studio at that point, and I really fell back in love with being on stage. And again, it was just trying to like, I just never had a big team behind me. I never had like a manager that pulled their weight, never had an agent that booked all my tours for me, never had a producer or a director that did my videos or my albums for me. So I just always, it was like either work some job that I hate to raise the money to pay for this, or just learn how to do it myself. And it's always been the latter for me. So yeah, found myself like developing all those skills just because no one else was doing it for me.
That is a crazy journey. What was it like? I mean, let's go back to Norway. I want to just kind of dig into that a little bit. How long was that program that you did?
It was a 1-year diploma course. So they call it folk high school. It's kind of like a gap year, an opportunity, government funded like scholarships and stuff if you're a citizen. And they give you an opportunity for 1 year to pursue something that you think you're passionate about, with like a risk-free opportunity to really figure out if that's what you want to spend your life doing.
What do you think was the biggest thing that you learned going through that program? Was there anything like even maybe philosophical where you're like, I don't know if I want to be in the studio working with other people all the time? Or was it more technical where you're like, holy shit, I'm around all these different creatives that are giving me these ideas and teaching me things?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was being surrounded by people that were kind of all pursuing the same level of music career that I was, having rehearsal spaces and studio spaces available to us almost 24/7, having a kitchen that was, like feeding us. Like all we had to do was wake up, go to class, and then go chase your music dreams like all day for a year. I was lucky to find some of the most talented musicians I've ever worked with at that school. And I met the drummer of the band that I was playing with on the first day. I was wearing, I think, like an At the Drive-In t-shirt. It was like super punk rock metalhead at the time. And he was wearing, I can't remember, Lagwagon or NoFX or something. We just saw each other across the room, and I was like, I already know we're going to be in a band together. And it was just that. We wrote our first song like the first day of school. We finished our orientation. We went to the head office and asked, can you unlock a practice room for us so we can go play? And we just got to work. And it was like that every day.
That being exposed to that sort of thing is so fantastic. I think here's the issue with, I think many of the people that are our age, maybe even younger, a lot of our parents, if you're not in the art, if our parents aren't in the arts, if our parents aren't musicians themselves, many parents don't even realize that these types of programs exist that you can put your kid through, especially, a scholarship backed one or something that's actually a school. So I think a lot of parents don't realize, most parents will be like, you got to go to school and go get a business marketing degree at a 4-year university or something. And that's the shit that's pushed down your throats. But, and we're talking, if a producer's like, well, I want to really work on music, and they're like, okay, you could do that on the side. But I think if a lot more parents were exposed to this sort of thing where, hey, there are these fantastic programs where your kid can go pursue something that they really love, especially if it's just for a year. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
we're opening this space for you to learn, test it out, see how you like it. And I think that's what most parents want to hear too, is it's not like a big thing where you're spending years and years and years doing a thing. It's more of an exposure, and being able to learn and hone your craft. But getting access to something like that, where it's like you eat, sleep, and just live in the studio or in that learning environment where you're learning music, is so significant. Many producers nowadays, and actually this kind of lends true to the episode I just this is going to be episode 105, so this would be 5 episodes ago. I released an episode talking about education, like when you should be focusing on learning and when you should be applying. And many, many, many producers, and I think this probably speaks to both of us, we started on YouTube. Like, we went to YouTube University, and we were just kind of browsing around different videos, and that is great. Having that access to information is fantastic. It's, it's the first time ever in the entire world that we've been able to do that, where you can go spend 2 minutes searching how to create a nasty dubstep resound, and within 10 minutes you have that sound created in your own project that you can then use. That's unheard of 20 years ago. The issue with so many things like that, though, is that there's no structure. So it's like you'll get a video that, you might learn some things in 10 minutes and you have this cool new sound, but now it's like, well, now what? The other thing that most of those videos leave off is how important your processing chain is to really make that sound unique and sound much cooler in your overarching idea. So having the structure of, like, you're on a schedule, these are the things you're learning, and all of the things we're teaching you are building up to this bigger crescendo at the end of the semester or end of the year, where you'll be able to tap into all of these things that we've taught you and these ideas you've been exposed to. So much of that is lacking in YouTube. And when that structure is lacking, you get producers who feel like they don't see their progress as much, or they just, like, things aren't clicking. And it's usually because, like, there might be a small basic fundamental idea that you haven't learned yet to be able to apply it to the thing that you're trying to do. And you'll have these weird gaps. So just that exposure to the big structure of a program like that can do like unbelievable things for yourself and your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. And that resonates with me in a huge way. Because while I had the drive and the passion and a lot of the resources, but I was, like, crippled by ADD pretty bad as a kid. My parents were not into, like, medicating me or any of that stuff. So I was just wandering through life like every shiny thing was a distraction. And I don't know that I would have developed the skills that I have today in the way that I did if I didn't have that very structured education. And I know people that are way more successful than me, that are as skilled or more than I am, that didn't go to college, that are doing great. And I'm super happy for them. And they got no student loans as a result. But there's a lot of people that just don't have that piece, that structure that you're talking about. And for me, going to a college program was the solution. And I think we're really fortunate that as YouTube education and online education has developed, there are way more affordable ways to have that structure. I think of, like, DubSpot. We obviously know each other loosely through the universe of Producer Dojo. Shout out Il Gates and all of his educators. So that structure is there now more than it was maybe a decade ago. And we're talking 2 decades ago, online education maybe didn't exist, like, at all. So it's improving, and there are many different paths that will all lead you to success. And I will also piggyback off of what I was saying about the structure of a college education. or a university program, I think a lot of parents, you said a lot of parents or people may not be aware of these programs. And I think that is part of it. I think the other part of it is it's super expensive to go to college. It's more expensive now than it's ever been. Tuition, cost of living is only going up. And I don't know that that's going to be a feasible option for a lot of people. I'm really unsure of the future of that. But what I will say is that every state, every city, every county, and also at the national level, there are arts scholarships and arts grants. And I would encourage anyone who thinks that a program, a school program, is the option for them, but is deterred financially by that being an option for them, look into grants. It might not pay for the whole thing, but it at least can like buy you some runway so you can like get started on that, find a night job. You know, there's always a way to make it happen, hopefully. So just be aware of like those alternate ways that you can pay for that stuff, because student loans are crippling in their own way, and I don't wish that on anyone.
Definitely. And I'm not a big fan of most university or college programs that are involved in audio, specifically for electronic musicians, because so much of what you're going to go through an audio program is like how to mic up a band and record the band. And then you're going to go in and how to actually mix that audio. And most of you are not going to be working with, a 5-piece band and working with natural drums off of an actual drum set and working with amps and with guitar. Like there's so many things that you probably won't apply. That doesn't mean you're not going to learn stuff. Doesn't mean that you're not going to get better at your audio skills, because inherently you will get better at noticing specific frequencies and listening for muddy stuff and boxy stuff. Like there are inherent things that you're going to learn, but a lot of it's not even going to be the stuff you're really going to apply to your own music, because your own music for electronic music is so much more synthetic. It doesn't need a lot of the things that you have to do to more natural instruments, which is why like finding something like an art program at some art institute where it's probably going to be a fraction of the cost of a public college or something. Speaking on what you're talking about, like Udemy is one of the best course programs online that you can go and spend $15 and get a 20-hour course teaching you about a skill that you may not know. It's how I've learned most of my skills in my adult life. But then, yeah, there are so many programs like the Producer Dojo where and sometimes you'll go through like the workshop that Dylan does, and you get to the price point, and you're like, ooh, that kind of sucks. But if you're really looking at it, the cost is nothing compared to most other programs and the inherent value that you're going to be getting out of them. So that's a big thing. Like if you're spending $1,000, that is not much compared to if you look at a college loan, which is going to be $50, $60, $100,000, and that with crazy interest rates that you're going to spend most of your time paying interest for almost your entire life. So let's get our way back over to what we're going to be really jumping into for most of the rest of the episode, which is the live stuff. So can you give us an idea of, I don't know how much you want to disclose or talk about with what you're currently working on? Because I know you're like, you're kind of putting everything together, getting ready for this big release in May. I can cut that out as well if you don't want to announce that time frame. But you've got a big project coming out, and you're building a whole headlining show around that, correct?
Yes. So I think this episode is going to air.
It is going to.
I think it's time to just pull the curtain and just tell people what's up, because I'm so excited about it, man. Just tiny bit of backstory. I am, for a day job for a long time, was and still sometimes am a live sound engineer. I went to school to pursue studio production. I thought I was going to like mix rock. I thought I was going to be the next like Bob Rock recording like the next Metallica Black album. That's not how it panned out. Twist ending. Where I ended up finding really steady work was taking those tools that I learned in my university program and applying them to the stage. mixed monitors as like a quote unquote A2 role is what they call it, like the second in charge audio person for a long time, and worked my way up from tiny little bar gigs with Behringer mixers and cheap gear and all this stuff, all the way up to mixing some of the biggest theaters and festivals in the Seattle area, from Capitol Hill Block Party to Neptune Theater and Moore Theater. Showbox is one of our most famous and beloved venues in the area. And I've had great mentorship and learned a lot of hard lessons along the way. Stage sound is really unforgiving. You only get one shot at doing it right. But unlike the studio, it doesn't live forever. So if you fuck something up, that moment's gone pretty fast. And people usually remember the things they like more than the things they don't in a concert setting. It's been my experience anyways. Haven't caught anything on fire yet, knock on wood. So my career as a live sound guy has been pretty fruitful. And the other thing that it's been really dope for is getting to be in physical proximity of a lot of my heroes. I've run sound, been like the local sound engineer for shows with Zomboy and DJ Shadow and all kind Craze, DJ Qbert, all these guys that I love from hip hop to EDM world and everything in between, as well as tons of bands. But as I transitioned into being an electronic artist, putting the guitar down and spending more time on Ableton as an artist, I've been able to just have kind of that vision of not just what a cool show looks like, but literally how to like plug it all in and how it works. And my area of expertise is for sure on the audio side of things. But as I've continued to develop shows, getting into video and understanding what a visual backdrop and video wall and projections, how that can add to a concert. So that led me down the rabbit hole of researching and becoming aware of Resolume. Currently still on my 10,000 hour path to master that app, but coming from Ableton and being pretty familiar with the session view in Ableton, I found Resolume very familiar. It operates in the same way. A lot of the effects are pretty intuitive and do what you think they would do. So just being a technologically intuitive person to begin with, I didn't find a whole lot of struggle getting into Resolume. Despite there being like not as many YouTube tutorials for that app yet as I would hope. But I think anyone that knows Ableton and anyone that has seen what cool video looks like at a concert, you probably, the barrier to entry is probably low enough apart from the price point of that app. It's like $1,000 per license, I think. But we were talking about
I looked into it myself a few years back and I was like, oh, maybe I don't want to pick this up right now.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'll tell you. Pro tip for that. Cyber Monday, and they do not advertise this, but Cyber Monday is 50% off of Resolume every year. So that's cool. 500 instead of 1,000. That's great. $500 is still a lot of money. The second tip is they will stack that discount with a student or an educator discount, which is also 50% off. So if you got a homie who can prove that they're in a course or that they teach, all of a sudden, instead of $1,000, it's $250. That's pretty sweet. Then if you bundle multiple licenses and buy them together, you and a couple homies each want a copy of that. They give you an additional, I think it's like $20 off per additional license that you bundle. So I bought this 2 or 3 years ago on Cyber Monday while I was teaching, and 6 of my other buddies also bought in, and I think we each got the license for like $180.
That's fucking crazy. That's a hell of a deal.
And if you've ever used Resolume or if you've ever seen anyone use Resolume, you know that it's like basically the industry standard for concert video. And if you could get that at that fraction of a price, like it's worth the wait. I know we're months away from Cyber Monday now, but just keep it on your radar, put it in your calendar, whatever you got to do. Because even if you're not going to use it right away, just get it at that price, man. Because when it is time for adding video to your show, that's the app you want to use. Basically, that's the one. So Resolume, the big addition to Resolume in my performance production came in pandemic year when every DJ became a cam girl.
Yeah.
Pardon my crude humor, but we all had to live stream, right? There was no shows, and I had been doing a weekly live stream just with like a GoPro in my basement called Base of the Mondays. Every Monday, It's the shittiest day of the week, back to work. Nothing cool ever happens on a Monday. So here's this little breath of fresh air that we're going to breathe into your Monday evening, featuring myself, another local artist. And then in pandemic year, as it evolved, people were sending in pre-recorded video of them DJing or rapping, or depending on who the artist was. And we were filming that on a green screen. And my buddy John was getting into VJing, so he became our house VJ. Enter the Resolume integration. So that's been a big part of my sets on tour for about 2 years now. When I DJ for hip hop artists, which is something that I occasionally do for like quote unquote day job, I bring 2 laptops with me. One is running Record Box for playback of the music, and the second one is running Resolume. Both of them are plugged into my DJ mixer. The audio laptop is running all the tracks. The DJ mixer is sending audio cues to Resolume so that we can have audio reactive visuals. Things like when the bass hits a certain volume threshold, it activates an effect like shaking the video. So you get a rumble effect when the 808 hits. Things like this, right? Pretty intuitive to set that up. You got to know a little bit about audio routing, but if you have the right sound card, you know how to plug your cables in and stuff, it pretty much will just do what you think it's going to do. And if you know how to run any studio equipment, you probably already know how to do all of that stuff, or you can figure it out on YouTube.
Are most venues equipped with being able to put on something like this? I would assume they just at least need to have some sort of LED wall or visual wall that you essentially are just going to plug right into. Is that how that process works?
Yeah, so I did a national tour with a hip hop group called Dark Time Sunshine in 2021. We did 38 dates across the country, I think, and a lot of the venues had projectors and screens built into their infrastructure. It's a pretty common thing, and I think it's even becoming more common as more people are integrating AV sets into what they do. That's quickly becoming the standard, at least in like electronic music world, to the point where I think a lot of artists aren't even advertising that it's an AV set anymore. It just, that's what you get when you book DMVU or someone like that, right? So we brought a projector and a fold-out screen for some of the smaller venues, some of the tap rooms, or some of the bar shows that we did in smaller towns, just so that if they didn't have that, that we could still integrate that into it. And I think visuals are as, if not more important to the concert experience than the music sometimes.
I agree. The other thing too is if you have something very, very brandable, that's unique to you. Again, I'm going to point to someone like Dada Life. Their visuals are unfucking believable. If you've ever been to a Dada Life show, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Like everything is color schemed the way they have their brandable colors. And the art style, all the way down to the art style. And so this just adds so much more value to, especially each track when they have lyrics playing on the stage, or on the screen. And it makes the show much more interactive. Instead of seeing a DJ up there just dancing and jumping around, if they're even doing that at all, now you can at least watch something that looks interesting. You don't really know what to expect. Anything can pop up on the screen, and it creates this cinematic experience. It's like you're not just listening to music, but you're experiencing it with a much more intensive purpose. Like every song has its purpose with its visual. And I think a lot of that is lacking with smaller artists right now. And sometimes even smaller artists will get visuals, but there's nothing that's like interesting about it, right? Sometimes It's just like their logo, and maybe their logo moves around a little bit, and that's great. That's good for people to remember who you are. But I think there's much better ways that you can incorporate that sort of thing, that can be brandable to you. I think throwing up like QR codes on the screen at certain points where people can scan stuff and either enter into some sort of giveaway or whatever it is. It's little things like that like all of a sudden you're getting people pulling out their phones and taking pictures of stuff. And that is just going to get other people to want to do the same thing. And next thing you know, no one knows who's like maybe scanning a QR code or not. But if they see multiple people doing it, then they see the QR code, then they're going to be inclined to do it. So now you're getting the crowd interacting with the thing that you're doing on stage instead of just kind of sitting there bumping their head or dancing around. Like there's little stuff like this that you can get the crowd enveloped in the thing that you're doing, and that's going to make them want to see you more, engage with you more, and be present in the show way more than they would any other time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I gotta laugh at the QR code thing because I got in this big argument with one of my collaborators. We put a show on a couple months ago supporting Collie Buds, the like reggaeton artist. And my bandmate was like, "We gotta put the QR code up, like let them scan to our single." I was co-developing all the visuals for the set, and I was like, "No, man, it takes away from the art. It's like breaks the fourth wall." I don't know why. I was being so stubborn. I was against it. So I know if he hears this, he's gonna be like, "I fucking told you so, man. Put the QR code on the screen. Just make it easy for people." And he's right. I gotta admit.
It's worth, at the very least, it's worth testing out to see if people are getting, because you have data on who's downloading stuff, when, and how they're doing it. So at the very least, you can try it out for a couple of shows. If no one does anything, then you're like, okay, this is taking apart, or this is taking away from the thing that we're trying to do. Yeah. It's also dependent on the show that you're trying to put on. There's certain acts that I don't think that would fit. Like if you're talking about a much more a Porter Robinson, right? If you go to a Porter Robinson, it would be out of place for him to throw a QR code up and like marketing something, right? Because his show is very emotional. It's dramatic. There's a lot of theater involved in like the visual aspect and the audio aspect. So throwing a QR code up would be weird. Sure. It definitely depends on the artist and the brand, but it's worth trying. And that's just one small little thing that you could attempt to do.
Well, maybe depends on what point of your career you're at too. Porter Robinson has probably figured out his marketing efforts by now. But if you're like in a support slot at a show like Porter Robinson, people are not there for you. So if you can give them a convenient way to take part of that home, and all it takes is them snapping a photo on their phone and they have access to your socials or your new single, probably a pretty effective way. And really, it's about convenience for a potential fan, right?
Mm-hmm. You want to take as many steps out of the process of them finding you as possible. Fewer steps, more actions you're going to get from them. Yeah. What are some...
I want to go back real quick to one thing that you said. You kind of expressed that there's maybe like a disparity of quality of visuals for artists that are first implementing that into their set. Or even, I'll piggyback off of that. There's probably even some artists that have a vision in mind, but don't have the resources to make that happen, or don't have a second laptop to run their own visuals or whatever. Here's some quick tips from being a sound engineer for years and years, what I've seen people do to overcome those hurdles. The first one is most venues that have a projector system probably have a computer at front of house that they can use to run visuals. If you can create about a 60-minute long video, even if it's not synced to the music, but it has some visuals that are going to convey the emotion or the feeling or whatever your art needs to represent, if you can pre-edit a 60-minute video, I've seen a lot of artists hand me a flash drive and say, "Can you press play when my first song plays?" It's maybe not perfectly timed, but it definitely adds the right emotion to what they're doing. That is a great way to do that if you don't have the laptop or you don't have the playback system to bring with you on tour. And the second thing, if you have the vision, but you don't have the video software or the video capability, there's websites like Fiverr where you can hire people to find like free clips from Vimeo, Pixlr, all these other things where there are royalty-free videos. You can link them to a couple things and say, my budget is $100 and I need you to edit me a 60-minute video for this. $100 might seem like a lot of money for someone who is just getting into this. That might be what you get paid for your whole gig. It's hard to give up that $100 for something like that. But think about how many uses you're going to get out of that. And for someone who's viewing your performance, how much that's going to clue them into the emotion and the expression that you're trying to convey. That's money well spent in my mind.
For sure. The other thing is it just elevates you. It makes you look better, not only to the fans, the people there that may or may not be there for you or who are just being introduced to you, but it also shows to the venue like, hey, I take this thing seriously. This is a job for me. I'm trying to make a career out of this. individuals like that are going to notice that, and they're going to jump to you if there's a slot that's open and you're already starting to establish a relationship. They're going to understand that you're taking this seriously, you're a professional, you're going to come prepared to entertain people. The more you get people involved in the show and entertained, the more they're going to want to go buy a drink at the bar if they're drinking, and the more money they're going to spend at the venue. And venue owners love that. Promoters love that. So if you're able to showcase your how seriously you're taking this thing, that's going to elevate you more across the board for individuals in the show, or sorry, individuals viewing the show, but also the people in the back of the house that are running the actual show itself.
Yeah. And final pro tip for that, try to clue the venue and your venue tech in ahead of time that you're going to be adding that. Don't show up. I said people show up with a USB. They definitely email me ahead of time. We need to use your projector. We're planning on adding visuals. Let people know so they can prepare for that and aren't having to scramble 5 minutes before you're on stage, because that definitely will not get you invited back to the show.
No, people don't like that. They don't like being shocked by something and are unprepared. They're like, oh, fuck, okay. I'm setting this other thing up. I guess I'll get to that.
Yeah.
What are some other things that you're doing to incorporate some value to your live shows? Because I know it's not just visuals. Like, you've got other things going on for this headlining show. Can we jump into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I am newly getting into lighting design. I am really fortunate to have worked alongside some super talented lighting designers. I know someone professionally through working at a lot of the venues that I mentioned before, also named Christian, who was the touring lighting designer for Zomboy for a long time. I got to, before he was working with Zomboy, we got to sit at front of house together at Capitol Hill Block Party in Seattle. And I just got to pick his brain on all kinds of stuff, from like the ideology of like why he's doing what he's doing, also like the technical side of it. And he gave me some good tips. I don't know if he remembers me. We aren't really that close on a personal level, but I just got to shout out Christian because I learned a lot from being in the same front of house booth as him. That is something that is really important to me. I've seen it work. I've seen shows that don't have good lighting design and the disparity that comes from that lacking. And so that's been something that's really important to me to add. Like I mentioned before, am not a big budget artist yet. So I don't have $200 to pay a fair living wage to a lighting designer every night that I play this show. So it's another thing that I have to figure out how to do myself. And I can't run lights while I'm performing. So that means I had to figure out what software can I integrate into my existing show that I can pre-program and press play on, and it'll run the light show the way that I want it to be run.
Is there really stuff out there that can do that?
There's quite a few of them. I'm not an expert in like time code and DMX language, but I am pretty adept at like Max for Live, which is Ableton's like extension application. So I found an app called Beam that is developed for Ableton. It's a Max for Live device that converts MIDI data and automation data inside of Ableton to DMX language. So all you have to do is use this middleman app, which is called Beam. You load in a thing called a fixture profile, which is like a channel list for a light. What channel addresses what function? Is it panning? Is it tilting? Is it changing the color? And once you kind of create that translation index or attach that fixture profile, then the DMX interface, which is just a little USB box that plugs into your lights and the other end plugs into your USB port on your laptop, that does all the translation, and all you're left with is, in my situation, something I'm very familiar with, which is like Ableton automation lanes and MIDI clips, and it does all the DMX translating for me.
That is so powerful. I had no idea that was even a thing.
I think it's pretty new. I just became aware of it like maybe a couple weeks ago. And they offer an education discount, so I found a way to be eligible for that. And it was like a pretty substantial discount, like 40 or 50% off, which is awesome. I Amazon purchased a single universe DMX interface, which means that you have up to 512 channels. And in lighting world, one channel means one thing that the light does. So you can attach multiple lights within this universe, but if they require more functions than 512 across your total lighting package, then that's when you would need what's called a second universe. I hope I'm saying these things correctly. Like I said, I'm new to lighting world. I know my lighting designer friends are probably picking apart my terminology right now, but that's my understanding.
It sounds right
so
to
far.
me. It makes sense. It makes sense.
So I have a what's called a ground package, which means that you're not attaching anything to a truss. You are either putting them on a table or on the floor, or somewhere where you don't have to clamp it onto anything. So I've got 2 moving fixtures behind me, which are backlighting the show, and I have 2 smaller moving fixtures in front of me, which are front lighting, and they move and they change colors and they strobe, and I'm like timing all of these color changes to match the visual backdrop, and I'm timing and programming the movement to match my movement or the dance choreography that's happening on stage.
That's the other thing we'll jump into in just a minute here, but lighting is another big part of a show that is drastic to the feel. And especially if this is a great workaround, because not every show is going to have a lighting guy, or if they do, maybe they're not the best at doing lighting for your specific style. So they might not be able to hear a track that's coming up that you're DJing, and they understand, oh, this is going to be a really dirty, heavy drop, so we should drop most of the lighting and go with like a really dark vibe. Some people aren't going to know to do that. Or you just can't get a live lighting guy. So having that, to be able to pre-program that in with the set that you're playing, is fantastic. I've been at shows for sure that had like no lighting, and you hear a really sick drop, a sick track, and you go, man, this would be really awesome if there was something else going on. It still sounds cool, and then I've been in a dark personal room for a club that's like 400 max people, and they have dedicated lighting, and we're listening to Mark Knight is a great reference point for this. I went and saw Mark Knight with my parents in Austin at the Old Kingdom, which was a tiny room, and they had sick lighting, and all of the tracks, when they were dropping them, they knew exactly. I'm sure he either had a dedicated lighting guy, or I trust everyone that's at Kingdom. When shit was dropping, the lighting was on point. Like it was hitting all the right sweet spots, and it changes the entire vibe. You hear a sick track. Artie is another artist that I went and saw at Kingdom, and he was playing some sick bass house stuff, and it was great. The build-ups, lots of flashing going on. And then the drop hits, and it goes to like a dark red, like flashing club space. And all of a sudden you're like, you're looking around and you're seeing everyone just like in the fucking zone, listening to sick music, but then having the craziest lighting experience. So that in and of itself, it's like, you have these 2D visuals going on that are great, and you have this other aspect of audio kind of surrounding you, and those are awesome. But there's something two-dimensional about that. It's not quite like filling in everything that you want. So like in terms of like sensory stuff going on while you're at a live show. But the second you get lights going, it adds this third dimension to everything, where you've got the music, you've got the lights playing to the music, and then you have some sick visuals, and all of a sudden, like, it's like a puzzle piece. Everything just fits together, and it feels more at home, and it doesn't feel as spotty, I guess. Things hit, the emotions hit when they're supposed to hit. People know the direction that things are going to go, and they're not too shocked by when something happens. And really, lighting is the thing that's playing to that. Again, the shows we've been to where there haven't been great lighting, yeah, you're listening to some really cool tunes, but there's still something it's not hitting that itch. It's not scratching that itch that you're wanting, which is this other sensory effect of like, holy fuck, like strobing lights and things that go to the tone of the song itself.
Yeah. So zooming out from all of those things, like conceptually what we're talking about, like what are we trying to convey by a performance? We're trying to like transfer this thought, this feeling, emotion that we have to whoever is experiencing this show. How do you do that? You appeal to their senses. Obviously, if it's music, you're appealing to your auditory sense. They can hear if you don't have hearing loss, you can hear from 20 to 20. That's a lot of space. It's a lot of real estate. It's a big canvas to convey that feeling. Then you have the feeling of touch. This is what people love so much about bass music. When you've got 2-to-1 ratio of subs to your tops, you're physically feeling that music resonate within your body. And that is a huge part of what I think appeals to ravers or EDM concert goers, however you want to title that people don't know until they go there. I remember my first big festival that I went to, I literally heard the sounds and felt the earthquake beneath me. And I can never have imagined that it would feel like that and that I would perceive that emotion of that art in that way. And then the third, arguably the most directly understandable to the layman, is what you can see. I think everybody can understand what they can see probably better than they can physically feel or audibly hear. And so if you can appeal that emotion by supporting it with color, by supporting it with an image, I think that's going to be the fastest and most effective way, the shortest distance from A to B to get them to understand what they should be feeling, or maybe even not understand it, but just feel it authentically. And I think that's what video and lights bring to the table. And it's something that is known if you've experienced it, but I don't even know how to quantify it. I just know that I want to replicate it because it's been very profound for me as a concert goer. So I want to give that to my friends and fans too.
Yeah, I think it's the foundation of a great show. We're talking about very fundamental, foundational, like basics of a great show. Great lights, great sound, great visuals. That is the basis that you can start from for creating a really great live experience. Everything after that is kind of eye candy or ear candy. That's just like, it's like icing on the cake. It's little extras that you're getting that you're not expecting. And when you get them, it adds, it's like writing music, right? When we're writing music, there's fundamental practices that we have to follow with creating drum patterns and pulling those drum patterns away and then introducing new sounds and building on those sounds. And you're painting with a canvas while you're writing a song. You're doing the same thing when you're building up these foundational aspects of the entire live experience. And then when you're creating change in the song itself, you're pulling things away very quickly, introducing some ear candy, something different, something unique that's like only there for a sparse moment, and then it goes away. And that's to add some nice change into the entire pattern of the entire track, makes it very interesting. And so shows, I think, are the same way, where you're building off those fundamentals of lights, visuals, and audio, and being able to pull things away and change things up to make it feel fresh and new. And then it's the same thing when you're adding in little things like Steve Aoki throwing a fucking cake. Like everyone's expecting it to come, but they're like, when's it coming? And when it comes, oh boy, this is the moment. Like this is the thing we've been waiting for. So it's stuff like that. Let's get into some additional things that you're adding to your shows, because dancers are so underrated now. It used to be like especially festivals, everyone used to have dancers, and now they're not so existent anymore. And I always loved seeing dancers at shows. I thought it was a lot of fun. So I'm really curious as to how you're starting to incorporate that in your own shows.
Yeah, man. So kind of the quick backstory to that. Before I was producing electronic music or EDM or bass or however you'd like to call it, I transitioned into Ableton as a DAW for a studio job that I had in a rural town in Washington. And I got hired as an engineer out of producing rock music and producing folk music at another bigger studio where I interned. I took the job and started working there, and quickly realized that I was not going to be working with any of these styles of music. They had a team of songwriters and producers that were making hip hop and rap, and they had the artistic vision, but they didn't have the engineering skill set. We talked about this earlier in our conversation. The tools are the same, but the application is very different between rock music and hip hop. And After doing that for a year, kind of getting into producing hip hop beats, getting more fluent with Ableton and MIDI programming, virtual instruments, all that kind of stuff, that studio job didn't pan out, but it really gave me a new love and like a re-sparked interest and passion for that style of music. Making hip hop is fun. Recording rappers and producing that kind of music is really fun. The music is cool. It's a little more instant gratification in my experience that you get to create a cool, comprehensive art piece without having to mic up a 6-piece band and do all of the intricacies of engineering. And I've always loved writing lyrics, and I've always loved the songwriting aspect of producing. And so I just linked with that and started to move in that direction. And one of the transitions from hip hop beat world into electronic music beat world came through my live sound engineering job, which was getting to go down to LA and work on a production for the Bloody Beetroots.
Oh,
this was at the Fonda Theater. And you reminded me of this when you said Steve Aoki, because their collab, I think it's called like Warp 2.1 or something like that. Can't remember the number, but Warp is the name of the track. That was like one of the first banger EDM anthems that I heard and just couldn't deny. Like, whatever music I've heard before this doesn't matter. This is the sound. This is what I want to do. The punk rock, like heavy metal energy was there, but the production was like akin to this hip hop thing that I had fallen in love with. So that was like the big pivotal moment where I was like, okay, I think DJing and that type of production is going to become a part of what I'm doing. Coming from rock music production and seeing multiple people on stage and the production of concerts that's involved with that, Bloody Beetroots has that. He has a grand piano on stage. I think it's hollowed out and has a MIDI controller inside of it, but I digress. The visual of it, those added icing on the cake, those little sprinkles that we're talking about were there. I just couldn't deny it. The video was there. The interactive secondary performers was there. And so that has always kind of been the blueprint. One of the early things that really motivated me to want to do it like that was Bloody Beetroots. I also got to see Zoo perform a couple years ago at the Paramount Theater here in Seattle. Same thing. He's got keys on stage. He's singing. He has a guitar and a sax player with him. The lighting and the video and them interacting together on stage are a big part of what adds to the music. So that's just kind of always been the vision for me. I haven't always had the pieces, but I've always been building towards that for close to a decade now that I've been making electronic music. So through being a part of festivals and seeing dancers on stage and seeing live painters on stage, also in like reggae music festivals, live painting is a big part of their stage production and that culture. I just kind of figured out early on that that this should be a part of what I am producing. And where it all came full circle and I like recognized the essence or the fundamentals of what that is was actually in an interview, Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon, one of the Jimmys. They were interviewing Chuck D. He just recently got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a rapper, which is kind of this cool, ironic thing. He's not a rock and roll artist, but he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Anyways, the question they asked him at the 50-year anniversary of the birth of hip hop is like, what has changed? How have people given up on those hip hop fundamentals or maybe bastardized like what the birth of this genre was? And he defended it. He was like, it hasn't changed. It's evolved. But if you don't know, the pillars of hip hop are MCs, the vocalist, DJs, the person in charge of playing the music, B-boys and B-girls, people who are expressing themselves physically in front of an audience through dance, and graffiti, people who are incorporating visual arts into a concert setting. And he defended hip hop and he said those four things are alive and well. The styles, the representation may have changed, but fundamentally, that's hip hop. If you've got someone dancing, which of course has always been a part of big concert production. We see this at like the Super Bowl performances, halftime shows, full of dancers all over the place. So of course that's a part of it. The video, if you have a live painter on stage, that's a pretty direct translation, but visuals and video backdrops, that's what has evolved out of graffiti, out of that art form. MCs, of course, rapping styles have changed. We've gone into auto-tune, effects, singing, rapping, all these other permutations of it, but it still is fundamentally an MC representing art through their voice. And then DJs, of course, have evolved into becoming producers, electronic musicians, all these other things. But that's like the core of what I want to put on stage and what I want to represent at my show is the 4 pillars of hip hop.
I think that is like perfectly, that is such a great representation of the thing that we're trying to express, is that like finding these avenues of adding value is pretty easy if you understand the fundamentals. And all you have to do is take the ideas and figure out a way to create them in your own image, in your own idea of how you want to represent yourself as an artist. Many people listening to this probably still don't know exactly what it is they're trying to do as an artist, and that's okay. It'll come with time, but experiment with stuff. I think experimenting with stuff is huge. The one thing you talked about was the interaction with the crowd. And I think I think the interaction with the crowd is kind of that 4th dimensional thing that really helps with the show of getting people engaging with individuals in the show. It's great to just be behind the decks and play your whole set and get off stage and leave. But what's even better, if you're really trying to harbor fans and get people to care about the thing that you're creating, or you want them engaged with the thing that you're creating, you have to be engaged with them in some sort of interpersonal way. Whether that's after the show, you go out and you go hang out with people and you talk and you chat, that can be a way. But doing it during the show is going to, again, if we're talking about like elevating your appeal, I think finding ways to engage with the audience themselves is a great way. One of the things that I'm setting up with my buddy Paxton, who's helping like soft manage me at the moment, he got a Gatling bubble gun. So it's a bubble gun that shoots out like 1,000 bubbles a minute or something. Like it's ridiculous amount of bubbles, and you just shoot and it goes out far. So we're gonna get that and we're gonna incorporate that in the show, which is like a fun, in the whole artist project. It's drum and bass, but it's very bubbly. Like the whole artist character is very bubbly. So we're taking that and incorporating it in the show. One of the other things we're going to do is like have a bottle of tequila that I go out and I take shots with people in the crowd during drops. Nice. Things like that like,
I want to come to that show. That sounds great.
It gets people engaged. We're going to get a t-shirt gun. I've never seen someone with a t-shirt gun at a show, and I think it's a great way to like get merch out to people. But also, if someone sees a fucking t-shirt gun, everyone's like, yo, right here.
I don't care what the shirt is. I want that shirt.
Exactly. Everyone wants a t-shirt gun shot at them. So yeah, it's things like this that you're getting individuals in the crowd engaged, and that is going to make the experience that much more memorable. And they're going to be like, they have a personal experience with you, and all of a sudden now there's this assumption in humans' minds, even when you're listening to podcasts all the time. I listen to tons of podcasts. I'm like, oh, I'd be great friends with this person. I know them because I've listened to 100 hours of them talking. So it's almost like you're already assuming, oh, it's like we're friends because I've listened to you talk forever. Yeah. It's the same thing when you're engaging with someone at a show. When you engage with someone at a show, inherently their mind, because they want to be a part of the in group, they want to be in part of the in crowd, they're going to go, I'm friends with them. I have a connection with that person. Even though the artist may never, they're probably not going to meet you ever again. They're probably going to, no offense, they're probably not going to remember you. But that's honestly because they're doing the show every 3 days in front of thousands of people for weeks on end. But the point is when you're engaging and giving that person a one-on-one experience, you're going to build a super fan with that person. They're going to have an inherent relationship with you that no one else necessarily has at that show. And they're going to leave that show remembering that. They're going to tell people about it. They're going to want to share your music with other people because of that experience that they had. So breaking that barrier, creating that fourth dimension where you're getting engaged with the audience is such a, I think it's a vital experience in the overarching story of a show. That just it goes a very, very, very long way for like solidifying someone as a fan at your show.
Yeah. I think those little things, if they're authentic and they're really sincere, I think little things go a long way. Absolutely. I remember running sound in Seattle years ago for a rapper, goes by the name of Kevin Gates. Really, really cool artist. Had a great show. After he finished playing, instead of just saying, peace out, thanks for the check, and back to the green room, he walked off the front of the stage up to the barrier, and he gave every single person in that front row a hug. And after that, every staff member in the whole venue a hug. And he said, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. I will always remember this night. It felt really sincere. He was there for a half hour after his show, like connecting with everybody in the room. And I'll never forget that, man. Cause like not everybody cares to do that kind of stuff. That's maybe like a non-performance version of the thing that we're talking about, but just be authentic with those things. And if you are show gratitude, either through like doing a cool thing with your performance or through a sincere thank you afterwards, like those things I think are the difference between people remembering and caring about you or just remembering that they had a good night.
Yeah, I think it's a great, people are gonna remember that. It's a small interaction, it's a small thing, but people are gonna remember that. And anytime you come back through, they're gonna be rooting for you. And especially people at the venue, if you're taking that much time to engage with them and acknowledge their presence and what they do. One thing, and this might be an arrogant thing for me to say because I'm nowhere near that level. But one thing that disappoints me that I would love to incorporate if I can get to that headlining slot is like going to the opening show, going out in the crowd and watching the opening DJs.
Yeah.
If I'm headlining a show, because I don't know artists that do that, but the community that builds of being the person that, your name is on the marquee, but you're out in the crowd watching the opener, that's fucking huge. Or even if you're not out in the crowd, but still engaging and watching the very opening show. One, you're going to help that opener because people are going to soon find out, oh, the artist is going to be there at the very beginning of the show hanging out. Everyone's going to come to the show. You're elevating artists that are working just as hard as you were when you were younger in your career. So little things like that go a long way, I think, and show your character and how you want to engage with the music community. Now, someone touring all over the place, this is where my arrogance comes in. They may not be capable of doing that. It may be their only few hours to get some rest right before the show. Like, You never know what's going on. So I can't sit here and say, oh, every headlining artist I don't think that's appropriate for me to say, but I would love to see that engagement more in the community, because you're just helping out the artists that are there. You're helping out the venue by bringing people in early, and they're going to spend more money. And not to mention, you can have more engagement with fans. Now that could be exhausting. That could be good or bad. It depends on how you can handle your energy, especially if you still haven't even gone on stage. But I think incorporating some sort of aspect in that can really go a long way in showing, again, your character, how much you want to engage with people, and how caring you really are to the overall thing that is music, the thing that we love, that we want to perform and express to the world.
Yeah, and it shows, you're right, not everyone has the ability to do that, and certainly not every headliner should have to do that. They've paid their dues. They've been there at doors like for years before, we have, I'm sure. But for the people that do, I can think of a few people that did that for me and that had something nice to say as I was like handing them over the decks for their set. That's stuff that you just remember. Those are the people that you want to support. And even as a non-headliner, maybe you're middling a show. Even if you do that for the person before you, I'm thinking back to like the lessons my parents taught me as a kid. Like you gotta always express gratitude and humility, because those things will always come back to you. And more often than not, it'll be in a way that you never expected, or it doesn't look like you get back what you put in directly, but those things will always come back to you in some way. And it's like golden rule. If you would want someone to do that for you, it's not that hard to try to do that for someone else. And I think that's the way to be.
Especially for a middle actor, direct support that's like local. The other thing too is, you never know who you're working with. That opener that you're working with, you don't, in a year, they could be headlining and you're now opening for that show. Like, you just don't know. You have no idea what's going on. So when you're expressing that gratitude and you're giving back, which is as simple as showing up an hour early maybe and hanging out and watching the opening act and being like, hey, that was a sick set. I saw the whole thing. It was awesome. You have no idea what that thing can do for you later on down the road. And it might not be tomorrow. It might not be a year. It could be 3 years down the road, and they'll remember you and be like, I want you to open up for me. Like that, you just have no idea what could happen. So, taking that little extra step, it goes such a huge way, adding that little fourth dimension of engagement.
And do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're hoping to like get a leg up on someone later. It's not tit for tat. Like, the people that win in our industry are the people that our industry feels should win. And that comes from just being a good person and being a friend to everybody, and like giving and respecting and being gracious unconditionally. Those are hard lessons to learn because there's ego that comes with being an artist. We all want to win. We all remember like that motivating artist or concert or experience that made us want to get into this in the first place. But keeping your eyes on the prize is great for motivation. You got to also just remember that everyone has different paths. And like you said, you never know who you're going to interact with. You never know who you interact with may interact with someone else that helps you, or vice versa. You just got to be a good person. There's just no other way to win. I don't feel like there is anyways.
Yeah, be a good person unconditionally with no expectations. Just do it.
It's hard sometimes, but you got to do it.
It's hard. Sometimes it takes some like retraining of your brain to be like, I'm not doing this for an ego thing. Like, let's not try to do this because I'm trying to get something or have some sort of ego boost. It's just simply because this is the right thing to do, and I would want someone else to do this for me.
Totally.
I think that's the direction to go by. Tor, I think that's pretty much it, man. Was there anything else that you wanted to hit on?
I would just love to plug my EP a little bit, just say a few words about that. I, throughout my career, have been a part of the hip hop world, the EDM world, and as a young kid, a grandkid of Norwegian immigrants, European culture and Norwegian music has always been a part of my life. And so those are the things that I'm all trying to combine in this EP. We're bordering on like 25 and 30 year anniversary tours of a lot of golden era hip hop. De La Soul just won the rights back to their masters, so they're going on tour again. Wu-Tang and all of the artists that are under that production umbrella are celebrating 25 and 30 year anniversaries of their album, Liquid Swords by the GZA, for example. And of course, I'm now probably a lifelong fan of sound system culture and bass music, and my Norwegian heritage will always be a part of my life. And so this EP is like the culmination of all of those three things in a way that I hope would individually work in any one of those areas, but also, and my real hope is to bring those three cultures together, create a concert experience where fans of rap music, fans of bass music, and anyone that knows or understands or has a connection with European and Nordic culture would find some resonating aspects of that too. So that's what this EP is. It's called Nordwest, and it's 3, maybe 4 songs. I'm on the fence of cutting the 4th song. We'll find out about that on release day if we get the 4th one. But it is the 4 pillars of hip hop represented through the lens of bass music and Nordic music. And I hope you love it.
It's going to be fucking fire. What's the release date on it?
17th of May is going to be the first single. And then my first ever headlining show in my hometown of Tacoma, Washington is May 26th. And that's when the rest of the tracks on the EP will be available. Beatsbytour.com is my website. You can find tickets to tour dates, all of the links to Spotify, iTunes, and all of that good stuff. And stay tuned for like open verse challenges and remix contests and all of that good stuff as well.
Hell yes. This episode will be coming out. It'll be May 12th. So it'll be 2 weeks before the full release and that show, and then about 5 days before the first track release. So anyone listening to this, head to enviousaudio.com/episode 105. I'll have all the show links for everything we talked about, including tours, tour dates, links to get tickets for that show on the 26th, and then obviously links to all of the tracks for the EP, which I will update this. So if some of you are listening now on the 12th and you don't see those, check back in 2 weeks and those links will be updated so you guys can go check those out. But dude, Tor, thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped. I know my audience definitely does. And I hope the tour goes really, really well. I'm sure it is. I'm sure the show is going to be fucking sick.
Yes, man. Thanks for having me. Thank you for and congrats on over 100 episodes of this podcast, man.
Thank you. Appreciate
Preaching the good word to people that are trying to do all the things that we're trying to do too. And so, yeah, here's to another 100 episodes, man. Keep up all the hard work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You take care, man. We'll chat soon.
All right, buddy. Thank you.